Everyone in town admired the Langridges. Powerful, generous, untouchable. But when a drought hit and their prized garden began to wither, the ground cracked open, revealing bones. 7 of them. Each missing person tied to the family in ways no one dared to question. I was hired to write their history, and now I'm not sure I'll survive finishing it. For 80 years, the Langridge name was spoken with a mix of awe and gratitude in our town. They were the founding family, the industrial pillars who turned a sleepy settlement into a thriving city. Generations of Langridges served on school boards, funded hospitals, threw grand harvest festivals, and built the marble courthouse that still casts its shadow downtown. They weren't just wealthy, they were beloved. Rosevale Manor, perched on the northern bluff, was the crown jewel of the family's influence. Its sprawling gardens were famous across the state. People would drive for hours to glimpse the spring bloom, roses, lilies, and a strange midnight blue flower that, according to legend, only grew on Langridge soil. And despite their prominence, scandal never touched them. No arrests. No affairs. No tragedies, at least not public ones. Even their losses, a fire in the West Wing, a missing cousin, a quiet divorce, were swallowed by the manor's charm and the family's philanthropy. They were, by all accounts, untouchable. That's why when the local historical society offered me a contract to document the Langridge legacy, I said yes without hesitation. It felt like uncovering royalty. I was given full access to the archives, the private library, and the grounds. All but one section. The garden behind the south hedge, a patch always closed to the public, even during festivals, was off-limits. At the time, I didn't question it. Now, I know that's where the story really began. It started with an envelope, thick parchment, sealed in deep green wax, left on my doorstep with no sender. Inside was an invitation. A job. The town council, along with the Historical Preservation Trust, had voted to convert Rosevale Manor into a public landmark. And they needed someone, a local, someone who knew the town's pulse, to curate the Langridge family's private collection. Letters, journals, ledgers, portraits. Decades of legacy to sift through, shape, and present to the world. It was the kind of opportunity writers like me dream of. Prestige, access, purpose. But the offer came with a clause. When I met Dr. Avery Lang, the estate's resident historian, he slid the final page of the contract toward me, his finger resting on a single line highlighted in pale ink. Do not ask about the south garden. I remember blinking at it, confused. Was it under renovation? Contaminated? Dangerous? Dr. Lang only smiled, thinly, politely. Some traditions are better left alone, he said. Agree to that, and the rest of the manor is yours. I signed. I shouldn't have. The summer came down like a curse. By July, the town's fountains had run dry, lawns browned, and flowers curled into themselves like grieving hands. But it was Rosevale's famous garden, once the envy of every horticulturist from here to the capital, that withered most dramatically. The fountains stopped first. Then the roses died in tight, colorless knots. By August, deep cracks split the earth, wide enough to trip a horse. That's when the smell began. A sour, metallic rot drifted through the hedgerows. It clung to the wind, to the guests' clothes, to the window panes. Old mulch, the groundskeeper shrugged. Maybe a dead fox, offered another. But the air grew thicker each day. Something beneath the surface was decaying, not plant, not animal. Something older. And still, the staff repeated their line with glassy smiles. It's just the roots. No one dared dig. Not yet. It was a Tuesday. The heat was unbearable even by morning, and the scent coming from the Langridge garden had soured to something almost chemical. That's when I saw one of the junior gardeners sprint from the east hedges, pale as parchment and gagging. I followed. He had been working near the oldest part of the garden, the rose arch, where nothing had bloomed since spring. The earth had cracked open around a shriveled rosebush, and inside the fissure was a glint of something white. I knew instantly it wasn't stone. He unearthed more. By the time I got close, 7 skulls lay in a neat row, facing upward. Shallow, deliberate. No coffin. No markings. Just bone, curled like seeds waiting to grow. We called the police. They came. Marked the area. Took photos. Then, nothing. Within hours, officials from the city arrived, whispered among themselves, and sealed the garden off with tarps and fencing. By sunrise, it was as though nothing had ever been found. The gardener was gone. Transferred, I was told. But I remember. The brittle curve of every skull. The dark soil clinging to empty sockets. 7 faces beneath the Langridge roses. 7 secrets no one was meant to see. I buried myself in the town's archives, hoping the truth had simply been forgotten, not erased. And that's when I found them. 7 names. 7 photographs in yellowing newspapers, spanning from 1942 to 1998. Different decades, different lives. But all vanished without a trace. The first was Harold Finch, a journalist investigating wartime corruption. His last known interview, Charles Langridge Sr. Then came Elsie Monroe, a housemaid at Rosevale, described in a 1950 article as sweet, soft-spoken, and suddenly gone. In 1963, a botanist from the capital disappeared while researching the manor's exotic plants. A teacher, a groundskeeper, a mail courier, a visiting architect. All 7 had been seen near Rosevale within days of their disappearance. Each case had been opened and closed. Quietly. No foul play determined. No follow-up articles. As if they'd been swallowed whole by the estate. What struck me wasn't just the pattern. It was the silence. No grieving families quoted. No public outcry. Just whispers of mental breaks or travel plans that never added up. 7 people. 7 graves. Each thread I pulled circled back to the Langridge name, either through employment, personal dealings, or suspicion. They had all been close. Too close. And now, their names had all but faded, except for one, mine. Because as I read deeper, I saw something chilling in the margins of the 1998 article. A note scribbled in red. Don't let them dig. It was nearly midnight when I knocked a book loose. Not a real one, hollowed cardboard, the spine printed with a fake title. And behind it, more fakes. A panel slid away under my hand, revealing a narrow recess. Inside, a box of reel-to-reel tapes, carefully labeled in spidery handwriting. Dates. Names. Some marked, private. Curiosity won out. I borrowed an old player from the town museum and threaded the first tape. At first, static. Then whispers. Faint. Disjointed. We shouldn't be here. Please, no more. I can feel them watching. But one voice cut through it all, calm and aristocratic, wrapped in practiced grace. Eliza Langridge. She was speaking to someone unseen, or perhaps to the tapes themselves. We never hunted, she said. Never stole. We only ever took what was owed. Click. End of reel. I sat motionless, chilled by the flat certainty in her tone. Other tapes followed, some filled with humming, some with sobs. One recorded a ritual, soft chanting in a language I didn't know. But Eliza's voice returned on the final reel. They'll say we were monsters. Let them. They forget what we protected them from. That night, the garden didn't feel like Earth. It felt like something sealed. Waiting. I found him in a quiet hospice wing, tucked beneath blankets, eyes clouded but alert. Thomas Grady, the last surviving Langridge gardener. He hadn't spoken to the press in decades. But when I introduced myself, something flickered behind his eyes. You've been to the garden, he rasped. You felt it too. I nodded. He chuckled, hollow and dry. They called it balance by blood. Said nature took what it was owed, and the family just obeyed. He told me how each Langridge windfall, a booming stock deal, a political victory, even the birth of a healthy heir, required payment. 1 for 1, he whispered. Always 7. 7 blooms for 7 sacrifices. The roses won't take root unless it's been done. He wasn't proud. He said he helped dig once, in 1963, when the youngest Langridge son survived a fever doctors said should have taken him. A drifter was buried that night, under the east arbor. I hear them still, Grady murmured, when I close my eyes, whispering under the soil, asking when the next is due. Before I left, he gripped my wrist hard. Don't let them turn that place into a public park, he said. It's not done feeding. It was tucked behind a false panel in Eliza Langridge's writing desk, an old, leather-bound ledger with brittle pages and an iron clasp. Inside, 7 names, each one written in neat, slanted cursive, each name matching one of the vanished. Beside them, dates. Some familiar, the night of a major stock surge, a local election victory, a sudden inheritance. And then, at the bottom of the page, a final entry. Just a date. This year. A week from today. No name. The line was left blank. But everything else matched. The pattern. The precision. The ritual. 7 names. 7 sacrifices. And now, the 8th space waited, even though the legend only ever mentioned 7. I stared at that empty line, my chest tightening. Who was it meant for? Why now? And then the realization settled like ice in my bones. I was the only one digging this deep. The only one who knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence outside Rosevale felt heavy, like it was waiting. At 2:17 a.m., I saw it, a flicker of light through the lace curtains. A lantern swaying gently near the rose bushes. Someone was out there, digging. I crept out with nothing but my phone and a kitchen knife, ridiculous, but instinctive. As I approached the garden, the smell hit me again, damp earth, sweet rot, and something older. Something metallic. The lantern was resting on a stone. No one was in sight. But the soil beneath the rosebush had been disturbed. Fresh. Carefully shaped. Not scattered like before. This wasn't an unearthing. It was a preparation. A hole, rectangular and deep, neatly carved like the others. But this time, no bones waited beneath the roots. This time, the grave was empty. Waiting. I backed away, pulse pounding, every shadow in the garden twisting toward me. That was when I noticed the wrought iron trellis at the far wall. A section I'd never noticed before. It wasn't a wall. It was a door. Slightly ajar. A breeze whispered out from within, and with it, the scent of roses and ash. Something was ready. The next morning, everything collapsed. An official-looking man arrived at my door, papers in hand. The Langridge Preservation Project had been re-evaluated. My services were no longer required. The archive work, cancelled. The estate would no longer become a public landmark. No explanation. No questions answered. Just a polite threat, it's best you leave town by tonight. My laptop was wiped. The tapes vanished from the library. And when I returned to the garden, the fresh grave had been filled, the soil patted down, the lantern gone. Only roses remained, blooming red and full again. 7 of them. 7 perfect roses in a place where nothing had grown for months. I drove away as ordered, passing Rosevale Manor one last time. The windows were shuttered, the iron gate locked. Yet I swear I saw a curtain flutter on the 3rd floor, as if someone had been watching me leave. They buried the truth again. But it's still there, under that garden. The bones. The blood pact. The ledger with one name missing. And the roses, always the roses, growing only after death. Some truths don't want to stay hidden. Some families make sure they never are.